And obviously, I'll be saying to people, please keep your mics off if you don't need to speak. But you know, all those sorts of things already. It would be helpful, I think, if we went round the room for the people who are not here to know who is here. So I got that quite slightly wrong. So we'll go around the room now and we'll start down the end with Louise, I think, if we may.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Louise Gibbard, Cabinet Member for Care Services.
Sarah Lackenby, I'm Head of Digital and Customer Services.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Councillor Michael Locke and I represent Scrutiny.
Julie Davies, Head of Child and Family Services.
Helen Williams, Principal Officer for Young People and Adolescent Services.
Philippa Elliott, Practice Manager from Swansea Youth Justice Service.
Councillor Paxton Williams, chairing this meeting.
Councillor Wendy Lewis, Wenalaith Ward.
Councillor Sandra Joy, Uplands Ward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we're just about to be joined by David as well, Director. So, as I said, it's a pleasure for me to welcome you to this, which is a joint meeting of Adult and Children Family Services scrutiny panels, basically because we're going to look at the social services complaints package first of all, report first of all, and then if you want to stay with us, the rest of the panel, you're very welcome to stay with us. Adults, if not, you can disappear. No, we won't take it as an offence. Okay, item 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Victoria Holland and Erica Kushner.
Thank you. And does any member have any disclosures of interest that they choose to make?
Yes, Chair, my daughter works for social services and I have exemption from standards.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Item 3 is prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. Item 4, item 4, yes, is minutes of the previous meeting. You've had a chance to have a look at them. Report back has been out there some time, and any letters that are there. So I don't know if anybody's got any queries. If not, I'd ask if somebody'd like to approve those minutes. Thank you, Wendy. And seconded. Thank you very much. Item 5 is public question time. And I suspect we don't have any public questions. So let's just confirm that. And item 6 is now back into the business of the meeting proper. And that is the Child and Family Services Adult Social Services Complaints Annual Report 2022-23. So do you want to take us through that, please, if you would, Sarah? Or Louise want to say something first of all?
Well, no, just to thank Sarah for compiling the report, and you know, just to comment. Obviously, it's really useful, and just to reassure everybody that it's important that we have complaints that we can and we monitor them so we can act on them. It's great that we've also included the compliments this year as well. And I think a point I made in a previous meeting, we've included in the report, just it's particularly in adult services, showing that 1 or 2 complainants make quite a large percentage of some of the complaints that we have altogether, and that in previous years that's kind of skewed the figures a little bit, and I think it's useful to show that for sort of completeness. But yeah, I'll hand over to Sarah to go through the report.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Gibbard. So just to give a short introduction before I go into some of the stats that are in the report, but you'll see that the annual complaints and compliments report for 22-23, it's in a different format this time at the request of the Governance and Audit Committee. And I have included both the corporate and social services reports just for completeness for you, but I recognise we're just focusing on social services today. They have already been discussed at Governance and Audit Committee, and we're going to Scrutiny Programme Committee also next week. The Council does take complaints very seriously, and we do use them at both corporate and social services level to look at ways in which we can improve and develop our services. But just to highlight some key parts from the report. So starting with adult services, there was a rise in stage 1 complaints, but as Councillor Gibbard said, 27% were actually from one person about the same case. Similar to other councils, the level of stage 1 complaints is mainly due to the increasing demand that the service is seeing and the pressure on services, which is leading to some delays in the provision of care. Stage 2 complaints remained relatively low at just 10, which is lower than the last 2 years. Section 4 provides the detail of these 10. And adult services has seen a huge 128% rise in compliments, and you can see some of those examples in section 5.2. There was a 50% reduction in closed ombudsman complaints, and as I note in the report, the ombudsman works across financial years, so they're not necessarily all received and closed in the same year because some of them are quite complicated. And you can see in section 7 the performance compared with timescales which are in the policy. Moving on to child and family services, there was a 67% increase in stage 1 complaints, again mainly due to the increasing demand and pressure on services. And there were 11 stage 2 complaints, which is 6 more than the previous year. The outcomes and detail of each of those can be seen at section 9. And similar to adult services, but child and family also saw a significant increase in compliments, about 97% increase. Again, the Ombudsman closed 12 complaints. So although that's higher than the previous year, it is similar to pre-pandemic levels for the Ombudsman. And again, with section 12, you can see the performance compared with timescales in the policy. And just a final point to raise is as well about the complaint service. So we do receive an internal audit every 3 years to ensure we're taking functions correctly. And the internal audit of complaints happened, it started in 22-23, but did conclude last year, and we got an overall assurance level of substantial. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Has any member got any questions for Sarah at this point in time? Not seeing anything on the screen, not seeing any hands put up, so
Sue's hands up.
oh, sorry, Sue.
No worries. Thanks,
Didn't come up
Chair.
soon.
Just concerned about the one complainant and the number of complaints he did. Did we meet with him, and was he or she happy at the end of the system or not?
Very complex.
Yeah, it is a very complex situation. You should probably guess from the amount of interaction. I wouldn't describe the complainant as happy. We are in, I don't want to get into too much detail, but we're involved in, or it's not actually us, the Health Board are involved in highly contested legal proceedings in relation to this particular matter. The court has just agreed a new set of arrangements around how the whole care management arrangement will be managed going forward, including the complaints that the individual regularly raises. If it works in the way that the court envisages, we will no longer be receiving complaints from that particular individual. But I imagine that the Health Board will still continue to be operating in very contested arrangements. It's a pretty unique situation, to be honest. The bit that we need to be most interested in is that the care and support for the individual, and it's not the individual himself who's raising the complaints, it's a family member. All of the reviews of that individual's circumstances, repeatedly find that he is being well cared for in very difficult circumstances, and that's the bit that we need to be most concerned about. So to that extent, I can give some reassurance that it is looked at repeatedly, and we've always found that good care and support is in place from all of the professionals and others' perspective, albeit not from this family member's perspective. Hope that gives some reassurance.
If I could add to that as well, just to put on record my thanks to all the staff. It's a really difficult case, and it's put a lot of stress on the person making the complaint, the family member, and all the staff involved as well. So it's not a nice situation for anybody, but hopefully we're nearer to a resolution.
Okay, thank you for that.
Are you happy with that, Sue?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
fine. I'm looking now. I can't see any other hands around. Doesn't show on my screen, me. Andra.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for really comprehensive data here and really detailed. I'm not sure whether this is actually your area, it probably isn't, but I just wondered from a child perspective, is there a child-friendly version of a complaints policy that should those children wish to go down that route, there is something that they can catch hold of and read?
We have processes in place so that whatever the service users need or aspect, then we've got different areas in place that can help in terms of that process. So sometimes people might come forward with an advocate, for example. So there are aspects at the end of the complaints policy. There are other organisations that are listed that can help, whether it be vulnerable adults or whether it be children, or to come forward with complaints. And we very much support and facilitate that with external organisations that help, if that helps to answer the question.
Thank you. Yeah, I did see that section that for advocates that said they can request some information, but I just wondered whether there was something that was actually in child-friendly language for them to
Do
be
you mean
able to.
specifically in reference to sort of their dealings with child and family services as a child, or just general council services? Or
If a child wanted to make a complaint, you know, a 12, 14-year-old who's maybe in the linked into the services, if they wanted to make a complaint, where would they start? Most adults would know to sort of have a look at a complaints policy. Where would a child start?
I don't know, Julie, would you like to, maybe the IRO or?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I think it's an excellent suggestion that we actually produce some literature that's child friendly. I can certainly take that back into our children's rights and participation officers. I think it's a great idea to do that. What I can say is that in the last 2 years, I can only think of 2 complaints that have come directly from children or young people, and they've always been supported by an advocate. And if they don't have an advocate, we do encourage them to take up the offer of an advocate through NIAS, who's contracted to support. So they have been supported by an advocate in all cases. But I think it's a great suggestion for the literature to be maybe looked at through a child's lens. So I'll certainly take that back into the service and we can pursue that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Can I just come in on that one and suggest that we also have a friendly, readable one for people with learning disabilities?
Yeah, an easy read sort of version. Yeah.
Yes, please.
That's okay. I can't see any more hands up, so hopefully that is it, except to say a couple of questions myself, possibly a comment. Obviously, complaints were up in terms of child and family services, particularly. There was an increase. I'm not quite sure, obviously, with the adult one, there was a reason for it. I don't know if that's exactly the same with this one. So there are some concerns there. But also, more importantly as well, I think compliments are up massively as well. So I think that's a credit to the department again. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment in that respect, but certainly if you want to come back very quickly on what I said first off, then fine.
Yes, please, Paxton, if I can add that, because the compliments are really reassuring that people are putting pen to paper and thanking people. And it's lovely to see those compliments. It's heartwarming. And a big thank you to the staff.
Just on your point on the increase in stage 1, it was mostly adults that had a single complainant. There was some, but it was small in terms of numbers. For child and family, it tended to be the adults where it was the same complainant.
In that case, I am not now seeing any extra hands around, so I'm going to say to Sarah, thank you very much for the report. It is much appreciated. I'm sure I'm going to be probably the 3rd or 4th time that I'm going to see this report coming before me, but that's another story, I guess. Well, we do get to know one another that way. Anyway, thank you very much. And I will say to the members of Adult Social Services now, if at this point in time you want to leave us, then we will understand. I'm sure you stay, you find the rest of the meeting interesting. Okay, thank you. If we can move on to item 7 on the agenda, and that's Helen and Philippa, I guess, a briefing on the youth offending system. Please.
Thank you. So just to sort of, I guess, just set out how we're hoping that this presentation will run, I'm going to give a bit of an overview in terms of the report that I'm hoping everybody's had the opportunity to read. And then I'm going to hand over to Philippa to go through some of the information from the performance report that is also appendixed to the main report. And at the end, as long as I can get the technology to work, I would really love to be able to share a video from one of our young people with everybody, because it's a really heartwarming outcome for that young person who's been through our system and actually was at the sort of more serious end of the youth justice system. So fingers crossed that I can get that to work at the end and I can share that with you. But to start with, I'll go through some of the key points from the report. So I think it was about 12 months ago that we were last here to talk about the Youth Justice Service. And I think at that stage I was talking about a system review that the service was going through. So just in terms of providing a bit of an update on that system review, the reason that we entered into it was to provide an opportunity for us to look at the service slightly differently and evaluate some of the systems that we utilise within the service, and to think about, over and above everything else, whether what we are doing is meaningful and is meeting the needs of the young people that access the service. It's been a really important piece of work for us, and we've been able through it to get some really important feedback from some of our young people in terms of the things that are most important to them. So being able to spend time with the staff, being able to have opportunities to talk openly and to have their voices heard is hugely important. Those relationships are really important. It's also given us the opportunity to work with our partner agencies, and through that it's enabled us to understand that perhaps the understanding of what the service offers and the reason that we exist isn't always entirely understood. So this has given us like a 12-month opportunity to really think about how we can do things a little bit differently. So we've started focusing in terms of the preventative element of the work that the team does, because I suppose we've got a little bit more flexibility there to be able to test things out and try things out slightly differently. So we have created an opportunity to think about how we take referrals into the preventative element of the service. And we are now utilising a consultation process. And that consultation is including the referrer, so whoever might be referring a young person in, the staff from the team, the young person themselves, and family members, parents, carers, whoever's important to that young person in their lives. And that's the initial conversation. Previously, we would have had a referral form and we would have gone through a process. We're trying to take away some of that system and really think about what it is that that young person wants from our service. In fact, is the service the right service for that young person? And how we can provide an intervention that meets their needs at the right time immediately, I guess, that we're meeting that young person. If this isn't the right service, it also gives us the opportunity to signpost really quickly to services that might be better able to meet their needs. So early indications from this process is that it's working really well. And what it is evidencing to us is that we're getting a much better understanding of a young person at the earliest possible opportunity. It's enabling the team to think about the staff within the team who would be best placed to work with that young person. And it's also early indications are showing that partner agencies who we're referring in are getting a better understanding of the service and what we offer and how we can work well with young people. So these are early indications because this is a bit of a pilot, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to pull some data together that will evidence what I am saying today and what the early indications are telling us. So it's been a really positive piece of work that the team have really invested in, and it's obviously an ongoing piece of work that we're going to take forward. In terms of our preventative element, the preventative element of the work that the team do, I also wanted to touch on the turnaround project. So this is funding that we received, as did every youth justice service, from the Ministry of Justice.
And the aim of that funding was to enhance the preventative work that we do, particularly with interest in antisocial behaviour. And from our perspective in Swansea, we've also looked at young people who are released under investigation following arrest or are on bail support. It just enables us to reach out and bring in more young people who might ordinarily not have had access to an intervention with the service. So I guess it's just to give a bit of an update. That funding is due to unfortunately run out in March of next year, but so far we've worked with 47 young people as part of the project, and it's shown us some really, really positive outcomes for those young people. So we've been able to utilise the funding to support young people in terms of group sessions within the service, but equally to support them to be able to access things within the community. So just as an example, the funding has been able to support us to help young people get football kits, rugby kits, to be involved in community sports. And they've also, some have taken up gym passes. So it's all about that diversion. How can we get young people involved in activities that can hopefully move them away from antisocial behaviour or the reasons that they're coming through to us in the first instance. So we're on track to meet our target. I think it's about 97 young people in total that we need to work with. But the referrals are coming through. We've got a dedicated project worker, and one of our practice leads is overseeing that project. So we're really, really pleased in terms of how it's worked. Obviously, the funding is coming to an end. We do have to think about how that ends properly and correctly for those young people, and that any young people that come through can have the full intervention that they sign up for. But again, just to provide a bit of an update that it's been really positive. Staying with the antisocial behaviour element, we've also that's obviously been an issue in Swansea, and there's been lots of discussions around that and how we can work slightly differently. And one of the ways that the Youth Justice Service have approached this is to think about our service works with young people from the age of 10. But actually, what we were finding is a number of young people, particularly through prevention, were coming through at the earlier end. So there's been some reflection on, well, how can we get the message out there a little bit sooner? So the team have connected with local primary schools, and they've been working with years 5 and 6, providing educative lessons, I guess, which have been fun and interactive, to help young people, children, to think about the importance of, undertaking activities that are keeping them away from being at risk of antisocial behaviour, or worse still, being on the cusp of offending behaviour that could lead them down a path I would hope that nobody would want for them. So that has been, again, that's been a pilot. It's been really successful, and the feedback that we've had from the schools has been really, really positive. They've felt that the children have engaged really well, and the messages have been really gratefully received. So we're in the process of evaluating that at the moment, and the hope will be that we will be rolling that out to other primary schools across Swansea. So in terms of our early intervention area of work, so this is the out of court disposals, the bit where young people are arrested but they haven't gone into the court process. That's our bureau process, that's what we call it. We have been seeing an increased number of young people coming through the bureau process, which on one hand is really positive, because we don't want young people going through court if there's no need for that. But obviously what that means is we've really got to think about how we are developing bureau and how we can work really effectively with children and young people in the community. So at the moment, we're working on a regional basis, so with Neath Talbot Youth Justice Service and obviously our police colleagues, to think about how we can start to introduce other partners into the discussions around intervention planning for young people who come through bureau. So the hope would be that we would have representatives from other agencies being part of those discussions in order to buy into the interventions, so that we've got full, meaningful community interventions in place for the children and young people. One of the other things that we've been looking at over the last 12 months is a project called the Drive for Change project. So this is a motoring project. We have a number of young people, and we've had an increase, I'm sure Philippa will touch on this in her feedback, coming through the service for motoring offences. ordinarily, those offences would go straight into court. That was the normal process. They go straight into court. Young people may end up having conditional discharges. They may end up having fines. Those outcomes would not include any involvement from the Youth Justice Service. And what we were noticing is we're really missing a group of young people here that we could actually reach out to and support. So the Drive for Change project, again, is a partnership between Swansea and Neath Talbot Youth Justice Service, our police and our fire service, supported by Swansea Magistrates Court, to offer a specific programme. So those young people will come through the bureau process rather than court, and means that they have a full intervention programme that they undertake. So again, we're in relatively early phases of this. But this can only, in my view, provide positive outcomes, because we wouldn't have been working with these young people previously. This is hugely supported by our magistrates who really see the value in the work being undertaken. And I guess for me, the last sort of key area that I wanted to touch on is participation. It's really, really important for us as a whole service that young people who access our service have a very loud voice, actually, in terms of how we're working with them and how we can improve and develop our service moving forward. So there are key elements and I guess key themes that Philippa will no doubt pick up in terms of when she's talking about the data, but there's key themes that come up over and over again. So driving being one, violence against the person being another. These are kind of key themes that we see with young people. So we really want to understand and work with our young people around that and what their lived experiences are. So the team have worked really, really hard, and they've created a youth participation forum. So young people are invited to attend that and come along and talk to us about whatever those themes may be. But equally, they would talk to us about the developments that we've got, that we're looking at within the service, so that we know that what we're doing is actually right and meaningful for them. And we're actually having some really good buy-in from those young people as this goes. So we're hoping that will continue. We also have to learn how to communicate in a way that young people want us to. So some of our young people are driving the idea of podcasting, where they're able to express their views very, very clearly in a way that they're really comfortable with. And some young people recently who have been involved in the service at the higher end, so in statutory involvement on community orders, have been really brave, and they've used the podcast to really express their views and their experience of being involved in the criminal justice system, working with the Youth Justice Service. And some of those videos have been shared with our staff development days to ensure that there's a really good understanding right across our service about what that feels like for our young people, coming directly from our young people. And I suppose for us, what is really interesting from those young people is they're really keen to speak to staff across the service and wider service to understand, well, actually, how are we investing in young people who get involved in offending, and how are they going to be supported, I guess, to move away from that lifestyle and hopefully have really positive outcomes. So they've got lots of ideas that they want to move forward with, and the team are doing everything they possibly can to support that. And I guess the last thing I just want to speak about, because it is something that I raised the last time I came to talk about youth justice, and that was around how our team is set up. So at the moment we're working from 2 buildings. We were, when I last came as well, and the point then was that we were looking for 1 building for the whole team to be part of and to be under 1 roof, and for our young people just feels quite a bit better, because our young people are telling us that relationships are really, really key to them. So we are in the process of continuing to look for that building so that we can, I guess, you know, have that vision for our young people realised, really, and the team can be together completely. So I hope I've covered everything. I'm going to hand over to Philippa now so she can bring you up to speed in terms of our performance. Thanks.
Before I bring you in, Philippa, can I ask members got any questions at this stage for Helen? I'm not seeing any hands here at the moment,
Yes,
oh, sorry, Jeff.
Yes, it is. It's my own.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah.
thanks to the report. It's really, really, really interesting, you know, the work you're actually doing. I'm glad you brought up with regards to children under the age of 10, because I think, you know, schools especially perhaps are finding it difficult to perhaps control certain children and so on. So I'm hoping that, you know, the support you're actually giving schools gives them an extra tool, shall we say, to manage the school. One thing I was concerned perhaps about, you mentioned funding. You know, I know a lot of people are worried about funding and so on. You've started something really well here. Well, I'm sure you did a lot of excellent work before anyway. If the funding actually ceases, you know, what effect or what can you put in place to actually carry on this work? Because you involve children, and I'm sure they appreciate the involvement and so on. But the last thing is to start something and then take it away. You know, it undermines perhaps the good work you've actually done in the past. So, you know, what sort of pressures, you know, well, how confident are you that the funding perhaps will carry on? And if it doesn't, you know, what are you going to do then?
Maybe I can answer that. The funding is ceasing. We know this. We won't have additional turnaround funding come March 25. Where we've worked with obviously a lot of young people, what we've tried to do is develop more group-based work. So any interventions that we've developed, so any equipment that we've been able to purchase as a result of the extra funding we've had, we hope that we'll be able to continue using that, and that will continue to benefit other young people coming through. So where there has been some occasions where we've had individual young people where we've identified individuals of like needs for like attached to that young person. So, you know, we've in some cases we've maybe been able to purchase maybe therapeutic support for a young person. Obviously that will end with that young person, but for the majority what we've done is developed interventions that we can utilise for not just turnaround specific young people, but all of our cohort of young people that come through the service. So we've tried to be quite sort of creative with how we've used the money and the funding, so that we're still meeting the criteria, we're still able to report effectively on the money that we've used, but it's also benefiting the population of young people that we have coming through the service.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add to that as well, we have a specific number of young people that we need to work with through the turnaround, the actual turnaround funding. I guess it's just to provide assurances that those young people, the work will be completed before that funding ends. So we're working to full exit strategies, and we are very lucky. We have an established prevention element to the team already, as Philip has mentioned. So that work won't just cease in the halfway through the intervention.
Okay, thank you. Sue and then Chris afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. It's really heartwarming to hear this. And I just wondered if recruiting peer groups would maybe benefit for some of these children, because peer group pressure is great at certain ages. And I'm just, it's a smashing service that you're providing that is good for the future for these children, and it needs to be continued. So I don't know if it's a question or it's a statement, really. I'm really supportive of you. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. And just, you know, you mentioned peer groups, and you're absolutely right. I mean, our young people are far more likely to listen to their peers than they are to, well, to me, probably. Some of our workers are younger and actually do have fantastic relationships with these young people. But you're absolutely right. But I think through the participation forum that the team are developing, we're probably going to have some opportunities for doing that in a really safe way, in a really supported way. So I absolutely agree with you.
And just to add on to the,
sorry.
oh sorry.
No, I was just going to say, am I correct in thinking there's a young woman who'd gone through YOS who's now training to be one of our youth workers? Is that correct?
Yeah,
one of the help hubs as well. So yeah, so it proves that it's effective.
But just to add to obviously what Helen has said and spoken about the youth participation, group. So how there's lots of things that we hope to achieve with that, and the young people hope to achieve. One of the things that the young people have identified is providing resources. So they've identified wanting to do videos specific to the court process or the youth bureau process, and that's coming from their voices. So they'll create that piece of work or resource that we can then utilise for other young people that may be coming through the service at some point. And again, I think that's a really powerful resource potentially, because it's coming from young people who've experienced the service, but it's also to kind of, you know, provide information to young people coming through on what to expect, and hopefully to try and, you know, support young people through that process. So that's just one of the things that young people through the participation group want to do moving forward.
Okay, Chris?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Can I ask two, I think, really simple questions? One, where are you actually working out from at the moment, and what would be the ideal location to bring all the services together? And what sort of resources and what sort of work do you do with the young people to encourage them to, you know, to stay away from the court services?
Okay, so I'll take the first bit. I'm going to bring Philippa in on the second bit because she's probably better placed to answer that part. But in terms of the buildings, we work from two separate sites. So we've got, I guess, what I would refer to as an office-based site in the centre of town, so in Duneva Place in town. Young people do access that as well, but primarily the staff will work there and utilise that as an office space. And then we have a youth justice centre, and that is in one of the warehouses in the Forestfach area. So it's on the industrial estate. So it's not necessarily the best setting for our young people, or indeed the staff that are working with them. But I guess at the moment it does provide us at least with a space to undertake some of the more creative and sort of hands-on pieces of work, such as woodwork. We have a number of bikes, we take young people mountain biking. So it enables us to sort of store some of those pieces of equipment and enables young people to work from there. I guess in answer to your question about what would work better for us, having two sites is really difficult. And actually those two sites are quite far apart from one another. So
they are totally different, aren't they?
Totally different, yeah. And so to meet the needs, we're looking for, our best hope would be to have one building where we're able to have office space, but actually we can also have the space for direct work and creative work. The team are exceptionally creative, but they can only work within the space that they've got at the moment. So it would be having one space. In terms of where that would need to be in Swansea, we're looking all over Swansea, to be perfectly honest. It's about having the right building as opposed to specifically where it needs to be within Swansea. But what is important is that our young people will be able to get there. So you know, travel access is really important.
Can I assure you, Chris, we're looking, we've got corporate building looking at all the different, every time a building comes up, we're sort of saying, oh, is this suitable for youth justice? But it's just ticking all the boxes is really hard, isn't it? In terms of, you know, it'd be nice to have some outdoor space, that workshop space, that a salon space even would be great for and you know, office space. It's proving a real head scratcher, isn't it? Unfortunately.
No, I was thinking the access it could be difficult but Duneva Place is the old by where Duneva school offices were,
yeah.
And the one in Forestfach. Yeah, I can see the sense you wanted somewhere on a bus route, really, wouldn't you?
That would be great. Yeah. Any suggestions? Gratefully received.
So I'm thinking of one or two, but I'll let people know, but Louise know about that.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That'd be great if you do have anything in mind.
And what sort of activities do they?
So from the Youth Justice Centre, we have a salon. So it's a fully functioning salon. So it has there's like sort of spaces for if we could get a hairdresser or a barber to come in and be able to work with young people. There's like a nail bar aspect of it. So it's really lovely and it's very pink and very girly. So we've got that. We've got the mountain bike projects. We have a set of mountain bikes that we can use. We also have people, staff that are able to deliver. So sort of mountain, I can't think of the term. It's basically to be able to sort of do up mountain bikes, so refurbish bike me. That's it. You can see I don't take much interest in the mountain bikes, but the boys in the service love it. We've got workshops for trade skills, so carpentry, building, there's glass kind of work that one of our staff do. So we've got a very skilled group of staff that have experience outside of just youth justice, and they've been able to kind of upskill that, so they're able to deliver certain sectors with young people within the Youth Justice Centre. Education takes place Justice Centre. We've got a tutor that comes in. Some of our school colleagues will use that space as well, where there are young people that like a more private space. They tend to come to the Youth Justice Centre if they're working with our service. We've got a kitchen area. It's very run down, but we do cooking sections there with young people as well. So there's printmaking. There's lots of different things that can go on there. So it's finding a building, I guess, that can house all of that, plus provide office spaces for staff. Yeah, and to bring the team together as one, because obviously lots of our team work primarily from the Youth Justice Centre, because that's where they might do a lot of their work, whereas those are maybe more office based, like social workers or managers might base themselves in Geneva. So it feels very separated then in terms of our team. It can, you know, it can be two teams sometimes, even though we are one team and we do try to come together as often as we can, but often two buildings may not allow for that. So a space for us all to be together, but that's also, you know, appropriate for young people and maybe a bit more to date, more current for young people, because this both what we have currently is maybe outdated. I mean, is that a good way of saying it?
Yeah, I think we've all got the picture. Thank you very much.
So we don't want much.
Okay, Kevin, you had a question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. The pilot programme you've got, you're rolling out to junior schools at the moment. Will you be looking at rolling it out to senior schools? And what type of things are the children doing to achieve your goals?
So we're running it up to more primary schools because it's been quite successful with the primary schools we've targeted so far. But yes, with comprehensive schooling, what we are doing now is running a programme for comprehensive schools. So they've identified maybe issues within their school or within their areas. So we're delivering maybe what we already have. So if it's around knife crime or antisocial behaviour, or we might adapt it to suit what the schools are asking for. Are looking to target the schools maybe within areas where we are seeing more young people come through, or where maybe comprehensive schools aren't necessarily referring to us, but we know from what we know from those areas that there are young people within those catchment areas that we are either working with, we want to be working with. So at the moment we are rolling out comprehensive education. What we hope to achieve in terms of outcomes is either young people coming through and then we're able to divert them from youth justice services altogether, or outcomes in terms of if they are working with us, that, you know, we are able to, you know, kind of provide the right interventions at the right time. So again, we're not seeing these young people escalate through our service. And what we want is children in schools as well. So if what we find sometimes with schools, they've got lots of young people to have to manage in the time that the young people are there. If you've got young people where maybe behaviours are such that schools are finding it difficult to manage, you might see more reductions in timetables or exclusions. That obviously increases risk in terms of them coming through our service, and it's a perpetual cycle we try to obviously avoid. So what we're hoping through this work that we can support schools to keep children in schools for longer and to have a full-time timetable, so that, you know, it reduces those risks really.
Thank you. I had another quick check round and I can't see any hands, so I'm assuming there's not any more. Did you want to add any much more to what you've already said, Philippa? Because basically we haven't given you a proper term, so.
I knew that would happen. I've got a summary of the data report. Some of it we have already covered through just a natural conversation, but I'm happy to share some of that if I've got time. Or
Yes.
are you happy for me to?
Please do.
Okay. So this is from our most recent data report from the last quarter. In terms of service delivery, our prevention referral numbers, they're down slightly in the last quarter. That's where discussion around us reaching out to more comprehensive schools particularly has come in, because what we want to do is to see prevention numbers increase, not decrease. What I would say though, in terms of our intervention numbers, that's the number of young people that we work with, that's remained consistent really with other quarters. So even though referrals are down, our intervention numbers or the young people that we're working with has remained consistent. I've already mentioned obviously the work within schools, so I won't go over that. In terms of our pre-court numbers, that's our youth bureau. So that's where we try to divert young people who might have committed an offence that could be dealt with or might ordinarily have been dealt with in court, where it's diverted through to youth bureau. We've seen an increase again in these numbers, and that's been a consistent increase across the last year, which is great. That's what we want to see. So it's diverting more young people away from statutory court processes, and we've seen a decrease in statutory court outcomes, and particularly in the most onerous order, which is youth rehabilitation orders. In the last quarter, so that's October to December, there was an increase in staff sickness, which is not uncommon for that time of year. Those that were on sick leave were on sick leave due to physical related illnesses. As a result, there's been a kind of a knock-on effect then to supervision numbers across that quarter, and just some kind of performance in terms of assessments being completed within 20 days. Again, we would expect to see that with, you know, an increase in sickness, but what we've seen over this quarter is that things have moved to what we would more normally expect. And in terms of key performance indicators, there were 7 new first-time entrants. This was a drop in the last quarter, or from last quarter. So 4 young people were not known to the service previously. Young person was given a referral order. This was I guess, a process issue. They had to come through Youth Bureau, and they'd engaged in the assessment process, but because they hadn't attended the actual Bureau panel, they've then got to go back to court, and the court have to agree another adjournment period to give the young person another opportunity to go to Youth Bureau. However, on this occasion, which would normally not happen, the Crown Prosecution Service were unhappy with that outcome and actually sent the young person to a referral order instead of the
You seem to have lost all sound, someone.
Sound, yeah.
I think it's back on now.
Is it? I can't hear anything.
I can't hear anything at all.
No.
I can hear you, Chris and Sue.
Yeah, but we can't hear.
Can't hear the Guildhall.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, mine's back
Oh,
on.
they're not
Yeah,
looking in the
no,
room.
yeah.
Oh, there we are.
Mine's back on, Paxton.
Right.
I think I'm the only one with a mic working.
Yeah, the rest of it, no, we can't hear anything.
This one is working, I think.
Yeah, I can hear you, Paxton.
Yeah, I could hear you, Paxton.
Can you?
That's a shame.
I'll go over the table. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes.
There we are. I'll carry on then before the mic goes off. So I know Helen has touched on motoring offences and the drive for change. Obviously, only certain young people with certain driving offences will qualify for that programme of work. So where there's been an increase in motoring offences and first-time entrants, that's because of the actual type of motoring offence. So they've naturally gone through the court process, though they have been given a statutory order. So we still are able to work with these young people, so we can deliver aspects of the Drive for Change programme, which is a really good programme of work, because it's part of their intervention order. There's no new remands over the last quarter, which is obviously very positive. There were 3 young people who were serving custodial sentences that were that their custodial part of their sentence had ended in that quarter. And I mean, this is not anecdotal. I think there's good resettlement processes with lots of all of the relevant agencies in place and who are participating in that. However, one of the key issues that we have faced and we will continue to face with young people who are coming out of custody is housing. This is obviously a national issue and it's not something that's just limited to young people in Swansea, but it does really challenge our plans for young people where they don't have the stability of maybe an appropriate home or an appropriate living, arrangement in place for them when they are released. These are conversations that we obviously have as part of our resettlement, and these are wider conversations that take place, but it just obviously presents one of the real challenges for young people, particularly those coming out of custody. So it's important to highlight that. In terms of reoffending, there is a downward trend overall in the reoffending rate for Swansea, which is really positive. Prevention, early intervention, again, Helen's touched on a lot of this. There was a slight delay in some prevention intervention starting. This is because some of our prevention workers who don't ordinarily pick up Youth Bureau cases have had to support with Youth Bureau because there has been staff sickness with our case managers or social work team. So they've had to step in there, which has meant there's been a slight delay with prevention numbers starting, though that's gone back to normal. And we haven't got a waiting list now then for prevention, and prevention numbers are starting pretty soon after they come in, which is great. In terms of contextual safeguarding, obviously we work in partnership with our partners in CMET. This is a really good process, one that allows us to identify young people or groups of young people or areas really early on and formulate plans around either young people or groups or those areas as a collective, and there's lots of really good work taking place. There is obviously a new pilot project. I'm not sure if people are aware of this, but this has been developed by CMET, but obviously it incorporates every agency that works as part of CMET. It's funded by the Youth Endowment Fund. We have a project worker from Youth Justice Service who is going to work primarily for this new pilot project. So she will be that youth justice kind of specialism within that team. So where they've identified young people in the 2 areas that they're operating from that maybe their needs maybe sit within our service, they will be referred to this project worker to support with. So that hasn't started as yet, but it is in that process of establishing. So that's really exciting, and I'm sure in the future we'll be able to feedback on more about that. In terms of our contextual work, there's been some good examples of work, particularly with 2 groups of young people. One group particularly has been I guess a hard to reach group of young people. We've been trying to work with them for quite some time, over maybe the last 2 or 3 years. More recently, we've been able to work with them in a group capacity. I know somebody mentioned group work earlier, and we really do find that where we have some of our more difficult to work with young people, sometimes tailoring that when it's appropriate in a group way is often the most effective, and in this case it seems to be working, and they have been working with us now since about January, which is really positive. In terms of obviously our safeguarding and our kind of risk of serious harm, so we assess obviously and continue to assess in the way that we assess safety and well-being and risk of serious harm, because that's how our assessment guides us to assess. Where we've got those that are high risk, in either case, it just goes to evidence, I guess, the vulnerabilities on both parts. Where we have had young people being assessed, I think there were 2 overall assessed as high risk of serious harm. Again, through the work that we've completed as a collective or a group of agencies, these young people are working on their orders with us. Which is really positive, because again we have found it difficult to work with these young people outside of them being on a statutory order, and we are seeing through this work that the risks in particularly related to these 2 young people have reduced, though I guess with safety and well-being, where we were assessing our custodial cohort, where you don't have housing in place, it really affects the whole plan for these young people. And these young people were coming out with very difficult circumstances, though I would still, kind of reiterate the agencies working to support these young people worked really hard to formulate a really robust plan, as robust as we could offer. Yeah, and that's it, I think.
Okay, thank you, Philippa. Anybody got any questions now? Desperately looking for hands and can't see any. Oh, I can. Chris, sorry.
Yeah, couple of things really. First of all, the fire project that used to be on Alexander Road was used in many cases for some young people. I'm not sure if the ones that were there were all under the care of the justice system or just in social services. The same with Roots up in Forest Fark. That was used as well for some young people. There is always obviously a shortage, but what sort of accommodation are we looking for? Is it an accommodation that would be managed, or would it be individual accommodation in flats, or again would it be a similar to Roots and Fires and the Fire project?
I think it's dependent on the individual and what we assess, though I could sort of anecdotally say that most of our young people at that age don't have the skills to live independently. In an ideal world, there would be some sort of supported provision to help them build their skills and life skills up so that eventually they can move on to independent living. Though there may be young people come through that have those skills and they could potentially manage more independent living, but it would be assessed on an individual basis.
And do we have anywhere where specifically we can have them live in?
I think options are limited. There's lots of young people who don't sit in our service that find themselves in positions where they don't have accommodation, or their accommodation might be compromised in some way or at risk. And then you've got an overall housing issue across the UK. So it's a really difficult situation. So I don't know is the answer. What we do have, I think there are supported provisions across the authority there. They look different depending on the service, I guess, Hel, isn't it? But the availability is obviously an issue because there are lots of young people that are in similar positions then.
Is it possible for us to have some sort of number so we can gauge how severe it is?
I mean, I could ask Helen maybe to. Yeah.
I'm really sorry. We're trying to fight over microphones that are working here, so apologies. I'm moving around.
Chairs then for a minute.
We are definitely. So, in terms of numbers through the Youth Justice Service, I don't have that figure, but what I can say is that we do have a number of supported accommodation providers that work very closely with the local authority. So we do have options for young people, but as Philip has already stated, those spaces are quite limited, and what that means then is that if those provisions are full, it does mean that we have to look at alternatives really for some young people, and the specific young people that Philippa is referring to, there were some of those challenges, and actually some of those, correct me if I'm wrong, we're moving towards adulthood as well. So it was the wider housing concerns that were impacting on those young people in terms of their independence and what they could access. But in terms of child and family services, we do have good partnerships with local providers that we can access and we can look to support us if we do need to find accommodation for young people. But there is an issue and there are limitations in terms of what can be provided.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. Thank you. Chairman, I'm going to have to leave in a minute.
Okay, Chris. Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's some time since we've looked at supported accommodation for people specifically leaving care in that situation. So obviously we're not familiar with that, where we are with that at the moment. Perhaps it's something that we need to look at again. Kevin, you had a question you wanted to come in?
Yeah, yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Knife crime has been quite rife in the media at the moment. The Safeguarding Lead has developed a knife crime awareness questionnaire. How has your questionnaire been accepted by the young people in the areas, have you been working, and what are their awareness of this particular issue?
I think it varies. I think some young people will say that it's quite normal and quite typical for young people to carry, whether it's knives or weapons, and there's lots of different reasons why young people may choose to do that. And then some young people might have no awareness of it. So I think it does vary. So the purpose of the questionnaire really is to try and gain a broad understanding of different experiences for different young people, and then maybe try to pull themes from that. So different areas, are there kind of areas where it's more of a problem? And this is really to help guide our interventions. So we have interventions on knife crimes, but bringing it more current and up to date, you know, recognising that things change, and, you know, life changes. We just want to make sure that we're delivering the right work in the right way to young people, and then targeting it differently for different areas or different young people. So it's still really about gathering that information, and we're still in that stage. But yeah, it is about just young people giving their feedback really. Though I would say, you know, for our young people that we've reached out to, it seems to be quite common, their experiences of young people carrying weapons.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take a chance and say I can't see any other questions now. So on that basis, I will say thank you very much to Philippa and Helen. 2 seconds before we go there then. I think 4 or 5 years ago now, you were in quite a bad place in terms of the youth justice system. We had that report. Obviously, a couple of councillors around here will be well aware of that, and we've seen the improvement coming through now, or the recovery from that situation, if you like. And we say more strength to your elbow, and hope you keep going in the same way. We will now have a look at your video then. Okay,
So
thank you.
can I check, Helen? This is a public meeting. So is the video okay to be, you know, as in members of the public could access the video afterwards? Is it okay for that to be the case? Yeah. Brilliant. Good.
Sorry.
Oh, hang on. Yes, we did check that out with I think it's, yeah, that we have checked that out.
This one's working.
Chair, I have to leave. I'll speak to you, I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Chris. I was wondering if you wanted to say anything then for a minute, Louise, sorry. No, it's obviously very important, powerful stuff. And if you can, I suppose, get people involved that way, then you're halfway home and dry, aren't you? Okay, as I say, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very interesting. We're glad to see the progress that the youth justice system is making. Thank you. If you want to stay, you're very welcome. If not, you're very welcome to leave as well. That moves us on to the final item on the agenda, performance monitoring. I suspect you're going to take us through this. Julie, do you want to say something first? Oh, you're still offline, are you? Okay.
Mine's working, so I'll go for it.
Okay.
So you've had the in the report is the data for January. So I'll take you through some of the detail in terms of what we saw in January. Pretty much the trend was as we would expect in that month after Christmas and the New Year break. We had an increase in the number of contacts into the front door. That was up by about 23%. And the demand for our emergency duty team was similar in that month, January to that which it was in December. We did have significantly more contacts into our domestic abuse hub, a staggering 79% increase, but the majority of that was about providing information to people. That was 76%. We do positively have less contacts that are awaiting allocation in the early help hubs, and the hubs are remaining in contact with families while we're awaiting allocation. The flat grant allocation has meant that some of our posts in the early help hubs are grant funded. We haven't been filling them because we're conscious that there isn't sufficient grant there. But the caseload trends within our early help hubs remain within the predicted range. We are looking at alternative models where we can manage the demand differently, bearing in mind that the grant allocations will remain flat. So we're looking at different ways that we can support families and children, for example, group work. So that hopefully will mean that more families have interventions and support sooner and don't have to wait as long as they have been of late. The number of child protection investigations, again, was similar to December. Our contextual missing, exploited and trafficked team is remaining very busy with contextual safeguarding, and they had 34 strategy discussions in January following referrals that they received, and that was more than double those which they held in December. And we are still seeing a lot of other local authority children who are looked after living in our local authority area, and then there are incidents which mean that we become involved to help create safer spaces within which they're living or where they're drawn to in terms of community activities, interventions. So that multi-agency partnership working through the CMET team continues to be effective in helping to keep those children and young people safe, and also the communities safe that they're living in. We had a slight increase in the number of cases open to our supported care planning teams. So that's our area social work teams, our children with disabilities team, and our looked after children team and the BASE team. If you add together the 1,230 that are open to those teams and also those that are open to early help hubs, that means we have just under 2,500 children and young people that are being supported across child and family services, which isn't an insignificant number when you look at the population size across Swansea. We have 201 children on the child protection register, which is slightly less than December. We're still within our range, so it's a healthy number. And we do have 14 unborn children waiting to be added at birth. We are seeing an increasing number of parents we're looking to support where they're waiting for the baby to be born, and we are concerned about the prevalence and use of particularly crack cocaine across Swansea. So Dave and I are on the area planning board where we're discussing, as part of the bigger picture, the support and services that are available for adults that are using a range of different drugs in Swansea. And we have our own internal team of both social workers and substance use workers that are looking to support those families specifically. We do still have a challenge, you'll see in the report, about the timely recording of statutory visits. the number there indicates that less children have been seen than is the target that we have. However, we continue to have manual recording mechanisms in place which evidence that we are seeing children in a timely way. So I met with business support managers last month to agree a process by which they can support the recording of that information in a more timely way. So hopefully March's report, we should start to see a difference in the actual data that's coming out of the system. We do have a higher number of children on the child protection register who are also looked after, and this is because more children are staying in public law outline, and that's where we're doing an assessment of the child and their family circumstances to consider whether the matter needs to be put before the court for them to make a decision about where the child should live safely. And what that means is we're taking the right amount of time to do the right assessment, so we're not rushing it. And what that can sometimes mean is that assessment might take a little bit longer, either because we need to look at different factors or different family members are put forward to be part of the safety network. That's positive, because what we want to ensure is that we do all we can to support children to remain living safely at home with their family or their wider family. But what that could mean is that you have two statutory processes running in parallel, which can be a little bit burdensome for families and professionals. So we're looking at ways in which we can make best use of resources so we don't have that additional burden, but we're still compliant with statutory regulations. We have 483 looked after children. So we're remaining pretty steady at that 480 mark for Swansea, which is still less than we had about 18 months ago. We do have 2 children that are living in unregulated provision, so provision where we've had to create a bespoke arrangement because we were unable to find a regulated provision. That's within Swansea. So CRW have been notified of those children. We have 20 children that are waiting for us to find an alternative placement for them. And that's either because they need to move on because it's the right time for them, or because the placement that they're in has decided that they're no longer able to manage that child and we need to move them on to an alternative provision. And within the 483, there are 11 unaccompanied asylum seeking children who we've taken on through the Home Office's National Transfer Scheme. So that's that we continue to be asked to take at least approximately one child a month for our local authority area. The majority of children you'll see in the data are living in family settings, so that can be a foster carer, a kinship carer, placed at home with their own parents while we continue with the reunification plan, or they're placed for adoption. So that's positive because that's where we would like and prefer our children to be. We do have, in January, have 36 children in a residential children's home, and of those, 4 are in our in-house provisions. We have 2 that are outside of Wales in England, so that's a decrease, which is good. We've had a big surge in inquiries of people interested in becoming a foster carer. So it pretty much doubled, I think, from December to January. What that means is we need to make sure we've got enough capacity to assess. So we recruited some additional posts through Welsh Government funding on recruitment and retention to help with raising awareness and supporting people in that initial inquiry stage, which is absolutely fabulous. But what we need is sufficient social work capacity to assess. So we do still have to outsource that to independent social workers or offer additional hours to qualified social workers in the service to complete those assessments in a timely way. We normally aim to complete those assessments and get people to fostering panel within 6 months, which is a good time frame to do a good and thorough assessment. So that's an area of increased demand and pressure for us. Similarly, in our family and friends team, where we've undertaken more unified assessments of potential kinship carers through the extended public law outline assessment process, that's put additional pressure on that team. And similarly, we're looking at ways in which we can increase social work capacity in that team so that we are able to complete timely assessments, particularly if the matter is before court and we have to complete those assessments in a very tight time frame once the matter's before court. So there's some pressure points in the service very clearly from January onwards that we're looking to manage as best we can. We do have a slight increase in the number of children placed for adoption in January. And I can see as agency decision maker that there are more children that are coming through where we're twin tracking and thinking that the plan for their permanence should be adoption. And I think some of that is linked back to the number of unborns that we're working with and supporting and again link back to potentially the prevalence of use of substances, particularly crack cocaine, in Swansea at the moment. But good for those children that that do need adoption. We are also similar to foster carers, having an increase in interest in becoming adopters. So that's good for them in terms of their plans for permanence. So overall, nothing particularly remarkable for January. We do still have the ongoing recruitment challenges in relation to social workers in the supported care planning teams. And we're still having difficulty in having agency social workers being interested in going to those teams. And we haven't got many agency social workers. I think in January we had 3 or 4. And the 2 that we did have in the area social work teams have moved on. And we may go up to 4 or 5 agency social workers in the next month across the whole of the service. So it's still not many. And we will have 8, something to celebrate, 8 newly qualified social workers graduating, so to speak, from our academy into our area teams from May to September. And also we have our own seconded students. So in total, we should have about 14 newly qualified social workers going into our area teams between May and September, which is a fantastic achievement for us, considering where we were about a year ago. So that's going from strength to strength, our approach of growing our own social workers. So really pleased to report that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Julie, for that run through on those figures. I'm going to ask if anybody's got any questions. I'm not seeing many hands again, I'm afraid. So in that case, just a couple really. Obviously, it's the trends that we tend to look at because those are important. There were a couple which were slightly trending the wrong way, but I'm sure you'll have picked those up, and I haven't got them listed as such. But it's something that we will need to keep an eye on and watch in that respect. With the trend graphs you have, you show upper and lower confidence limits. How do you calculate those? What's the basis of that calculation?
So we do that by looking back at the data and then looking at in terms of numbers and then comparing ourselves to other. So it's basically looking back in time and looking at trends that come out of that. And then what we tend to find is when you extrapolate that data out into a graph, you'll generally have a band in the middle, which you can see that we stay within that band. And then from that, you'll determine the high point and the low point. And then you will always have some troughs and peaks. That's the wrong way around. Peaks and troughs. And so those are the, you would call sort of unusual occurrences. So at that point in time, what was different? And they draw you to think about, well, what's different at that point in time? So when you look back at data in time, normally over a couple, 2 to 3 years, it'll give you that thick band in the middle, and that the top and the bottom are the upper and lower limits that we know in terms of our capacity in terms of staffing and our resources available, that we manage that demand well, safe and effective service. Where we then might want to think differently is if we have a decrease in staffing or a big surge in demand and we haven't got any more staffing, then how can we manage that safely and effectively?
If I understand you right, those upper and lower limits are based on historical figures.
Yes, in essence.
It's not
yes.
Say 10% either side of the median.
Yeah, it's an indicator of if we stay within those bands, then we know we're within the existing resources we have available, we can deliver a safe and effective service.
Because obviously you're going to get fluctuations.
Yes.
Nice. When you get outside of those bands, that is really a problem. Anybody else got any questions, any comments? It's all very quiet. So on that basis, I don't think at this stage, well, I've gone through and I could pick out a few things, but that's quite specific and basically there's not an awful lot there as far as I can see in terms of things that we need to be concerned about. So in that case, I would say thank you very much for the report, and we look forward to the next one and hope it keeps the same standard up. And it's really good to hear what you're saying about the academy. People, I think that's my personal opinion is that was very innovative, and it certainly seems to be working very well. And I'm sure others will follow you, won't they? Okay, thank you very much. And that moves us on to the last item on the agenda then, I think, which is our work programme. Obviously, we haven't got many meetings left now for the rest of this year in that sense. And our next meeting will be on the 1st of May, which is the last one of the municipal year anyway. And we'll be talking about corporate priorities, a CIW inspection report on TNANT, which is going to be interesting, I guess, to see what they're saying now. And we'll look back for ourselves and do a little bit of introspection and do a bit of scrutiny of ourselves and see where we are, I think. So on that basis, unless anybody's got anything else they want to say, I'll close the meeting and say thank you very much for everybody who's taken part. Thank you.
Thank you.